We are less than 4 weeks away from the start of college basketball season, and the Big East released its television schedule last week. We know where to watch Villanova Wildcat basketball in 2025, 2026. What does the schedule release tell us about the amount of respect that the Big East still holds for Villanova and the national cachet that the Wildcats still carry? Speaking of national relevance, relevant news in college athletics, the Big Ten leaking a possible dalliance with private capital investment. What would be the trickle down effects for college sports, for the Big East, and for Villanova? We discuss it all next on Holy Nova. And hi, everybody. Welcome to this edition of Holy Nova. We're part of the Big East Energy Network. I'm Matt Janus alongside my co-host, David White. And there is no joy in Mudville right now, David White. We are recording this on Monday night, just moments after the Phillies ripped the Philadelphia area's collective sports hearts right out, rallying back to get within a single run of the Dodgers in Game 2 of the NLDS. And then the offense falls flat. It is deja vu all over again, as the great Yogi Berra once said, and just a tough weekend on the sports scene in the city of Brotherly Love.
Yeah, it feels like it's been a tough sports weekend for me too. I mean, you like to pick on me for Billy Belichick, and it's so much fun right now in Chapel Hill. Then the Yankees suck. I'm all out of wits. The only thing I have going for me is that Drake May is playing well.
Well, I guess that's something. We have this show that we can look at as well, because the good news is basketball season is right around the corner. As we said, less than 4 weeks away. That really kind of snuck up after we have been pining for it to start all year long, and we want you to continue to help us grow our audience. We are on the rise. A big part of the reason has been your interaction with our show. So please continue to hit the subscribe button for all our Big East Energy Network coverage. We've got UConn, we've got Seton Hall, we've got Xavier, Creighton. Our list of teams continues to grow. St. John's. We are just going to be all over this Big East thing all season long. And please like this video. It makes such a big deal in the algorithm to help us get in front of more people. And also let us know what you think in the comments. Tell us where we're foolish. Tell us where we've made good points. It's a big deal for us. It helps us get us in front of more Villanova fans so we can do more coverage and we can just continue to ratchet this thing up. A sign that basketball season is getting ratcheted up, or it's getting closer and closer, at least to starting, is Big East's annual television schedule release, which came out maybe a little bit later this year, but it was a little bit more anticipated as well. Remember, a new look TV contract this year, as the Big East has partnered with ESPN as part of a deal to get all of their Olympic sports and women's basketball on the ESPN Plus platform. So there will be some non-conference Big East men's games on ESPN Plus. There will also be a new deal with TNT. Turner is involved. We'll see games on TNT and True TV. But the big story for Villanova, I think, is twofold. Let's start with the good. Still a lot of respect for this team inside this conference. They get 3 games on Big Fox, and they also get 8 games on TNT. That new TNT package that I think is going to be one of the primary things inside the league this year that a lot of big games are going to land on, and that are going to be very accessible on both that HBO Max platform that everybody seems to have, and more importantly, on regular TV, which so many of the Big East fans have been telling us is important. Well, that's going to be there this year, and it's going to be something that I think tells you that Villanova still carries a lot of weight inside the conference office and with the casual viewer.
Yeah, I think Villanova still moves the needle. It's going to be interesting to see how the TNT deal works out. Obviously, it seems like TNT is going to try and be filling the void that's left by the NBA leaving TNT. So maybe you pick up some more viewers there. I think it's an exciting opportunity to try and get some viewers that would have otherwise been watching the NBA on TNT.
For sure. And the thing about it is, too, they know how to cover basketball. They've kept so much of their staff in place. So you know you're going to get a high-level broadcast. You know their broadcasters are good because they want to work the NCAA tournament. So you're going to get guys that are seasoned pros, which makes the experience, I think, a lot more enjoyable. And then just more importantly, you can tell your recruits, hey, here's where we're going to be. Here's how you access it. And I
Yeah.
think that's still a big deal. It's not nearly as big a deal as it used to be, but it still matters. It still resonates. We both work in women's basketball for years. I mean, you were on coaching staffs for a long time of a lot of teams that were on the dreaded Flow Sports. I love Flow Sports. I've made a lot of money over the years for Flow Sports. Full disclosure, I still do. I don't think the product is nearly as bad as everyone else would insinuate. I think a lot of the problems, I think Flow Sports took the blame for. It was actually productions run by schools on campuses where a lot of those issues actually came about from. But nevertheless, it's a lot of money, and you get basically what you're trying to sign up to get. You don't get all the other bonuses that you get from ESPN Plus. So being there is a good thing, and being able to kind of just point to high school kids, hey, 7 o'clock TNT, 5 p.m. on Saturday, Big Fox. These are things very simple to explain.
And I think that it's going to be interesting now that ESPN has finally released a full streaming service that you can watch every ESPN game, whether it's on ESPN proper or ESPN Plus, through their app, and not have to worry about getting your parents' TV cable login to watch games. And then, I mean, like you said, there are 2 games that are still to be determined where they are, and depending on how Nova start. I mean, I assume the Wisconsin game is probably going to be on a pretty good channel, and so there are going to be plenty of opportunities to see Nova on great channels this year.
Well, you know, it's kind of funny because the two to be determined games are the 2 Big Ten games that you're playing on the road. And you know, you're either probably going to be on Fox, FS1, or I guess Big Ten Network is a possibility. Probably not, though. I think that is a matchup that will have enough eyeballs drawn to it. Now, it is in the midst of football season, so that's always something that you have to keep in mind as well when the TV schedules are coming together, and that will be something that obviously will stay in top of mind. But let's also talk about the third line there, the 9 streaming only games, 3 on ESPN Plus in the non-conference portion of the season, and then 6 on Peacock. That's going to get some taking used to. I think that we saw it happen in small doses last year, and it was a nice little hors d'oeuvre for Big East fans, especially for traditionalists, to understand that you're not just going to be able to push guide on the TV and necessarily find the game. It's going to be a little bit different in that regard. But they did give you a kind of an exchange, so to speak. You can't watch it on traditional cable. You can't use your DVR maybe to watch it on delay if you got to put kids to bed, as maybe a couple people on this podcast like to do with their live sports watching habits. But what you can do is tune into a game, and a lot of them are going to be broadcast by a voice the Big East fans just seem to absolutely love and treasure, and that's John Fanta, who NBC hired away to be their lead college basketball Big East voice, and I think that's a big deal for Big East fans this year.
Yeah, so I mean, I think Peacock they do a good job on streaming. I can't say I've watched a lot, but I know the NFL had one of the playoff games on Peacock last year. Have they had a regular season game this year? I think.
Yeah, they had the Friday opener, and the one overseas.
So, I mean, Peacock's coming up. I mean, the traditional fans are going to have to figure out how to get a Peacock login or subscribe for Peacock. But I think that it's the wave of the future. It's going to be what traditional TV contracts become. They're going to become more streaming. That's just what's happening now, is more and more, especially young people, quote unquote, cut the cord and start just exclusively buying Netflix and Peacock and which costs just as much as cable.
More. What a bamboozle these companies were able to do. Talk about a bait and switch. It was all these years, you're paying for things you do not watch. And then they just so fragmented streaming services. Sports are now going to become a big part of that. That's the reason why they're paying for it, because people want to watch their teams. And so you're going to be pulled in all types of different directions. Yeah, there's no doubt about it. You're going to be pining for the days where you were spending $175 getting cable and getting to watch all these things in one spot, as opposed to having to spend upwards of what, 300? I mean, what did they have that latest study? If you wanted to watch every NFL game, you're going to have to drop close to $1,000 over the course of the season this year.
That's crazy. And there were about 3 good years where cutting the cord was going well. You could get like YouTube TV for like $50 and get everything you wanted. And then the cable companies realized, wait a minute, we can just create these streaming services and charge you whatever we want.
It is kind of funny. Peacock is owned by a certain Xfinity, yet their games will not be on Xfinity. Go figure. I mean, it was my first job out of college was for Comcast, and I remember them talking about cord cutters, and this is way back in 2006, and about what the future might hold for the company, and they had like 6,000 different ideas. None of them, by the way, were a streaming service partnering with NBC. That wasn't on the radar back then, but they always find a way to make their money. But as these old men yell at the clouds about how the world has changed, the one thing that does matter that we should get back to in the conversation, twofold. A, the respect shown to Villanova with the 3 games on Fox and the 8 games on TNT, that's still a big deal in that the brand name of Villanova carries weight. And right now, of all times, that matters as Kevin Willer's trying to rebuild the recruiting ties that maybe had fallen off a little bit the last few years, and also just rebuild the reputation of Villanova as a pillar inside the Big East. As we've talked about many times over the course of this summer, the middle underbelly of the Big East has gotten a little soft here the last few years, and it's got to find a way to strengthen up. The conversation about whether the Big East is a power conference or not is a preposterous one. They have 2 legit Final Four contenders in the conference coming into the year. Non-power conferences don't have that. Where they lie in the hierarchy of power conferences is a legitimate conversation right now, because the funding is less at the Big East, and because of the fact that they have not put forth, outside of UConn, a ton of March success the last few years. And that coincides quite honestly with the demise of Villanova after the retirement of Jay Wright. The conference needs either Georgetown or Villanova, would love both, to get it going again. And you can see with the way this TV contract was sort of structured and the way the games were allocated this year, they're still counting on Villanova to draw in some eyeballs.
Well, I think it's twofold. It's respect for the Villanova name. It's also the respect for Kevin Willard as a coach and the belief that he is going to be able to turn it around. If Kyle Neptune's still the coach, I don't know if this much respect is given to Villanova. I think they still get a lot because, like you said, the conference just needs a brand to step up to be able to play with UConn, have the success in March, fight for Final Fours, national championships, those kind of things. And I mean, you're exactly right. The end of Jay Wright coincided with the beginning of Dan Hurley, and it kind of went like this, where it would have been great if both had happened at the same time.
Yeah, that would have been something the league office up in New York would have relished. It is good to get Rick Pitino in. He kind of filled that void in terms of the big name, and last year was a fairy tale type run to a 2 seed. Now it looks like they have Final Four aspirations to take that next step this year, and that's great. But Rick Pitino is not exactly a young guy who's probably going to be at this for another 10 years or so. If you read Hurley's book, who knows how much longer he'll be at this, as he seems to be contemplating retirement by the day, at least, to sell books. So you got to find a way to get some of your brands back and getting them back on track. And I think getting them on national TV certainly will help that. Maybe non-Villanova fan bases won't like to hear that. They'll call it arrogance. There's probably some truth to that, but sometimes arrogance is earned. I think for Villanova fans, they will point to resume, history, tradition, and name identification, which are all huge things in college athletics, and Villanova has them all in terms of basketball.
Well, and I think those people who would complain about the quote-unquote arrogance would relish in the benefits that comes along with a Villanova or a Georgetown being good. Because because Creighton has been good for the last few years, even if Villanova and Georgetown reach around a Creighton level, that raises what the Big East does. And now maybe one of those teams that was sitting on the bubble is in because everybody, they recognize names and they're human. So they see, oh, Villanova's playing well, UConn's playing well. Big East is a real good conference. Let's pull in 4 and 5 out of the Big East into the tournament. It helps everybody.
Prime example of this, if St. John's had Providence or Seton Hall's resume 2 years ago, when remember all three got snubbed and inexplicably the Big East only got 3 teams into the NCAA tournament, still a criminal injustice, especially considering the Mountain West Conference got more than a half or got a half dozen and still can't quite figure that one out. But if St. John's has Providence or Seton Hall's resume, can't tell me they're not in. St.
No,
John's had the weakest of the 3 resumes. They had the name and the Rick Pitino brand that the committee probably would have looked to try to sneak in, not, I think, in any type of a nefarious way, but just out of, I think, blind, just the way it works. I mean, I just
blind loyalty and the fact that, like, the committee, they are
blind
humans too.
bias.
Yeah.
Just blind bias of Rick
Yeah.
Pitino is a guy that succeeds.
Well, they're human too. The NCAA tournament is supposed to make money, and storylines make money. Rick Pitino draws eyeballs. That makes money. Like I understand that we want this to be purely, hey, we're going to put your resume against your resume, and we're going to see who the best team is. It's impossible to do that. We can say, these 2 resumes are close. This is Rick Pitino, and this is not. So where are we going to go?
And I'd like $1 million to work 10 hours a week, but I haven't found that
Yeah.
job yet. It just doesn't really exist for many people out there. It's not how the world works. Speaking of money and speaking of St. John's, one other thing that we should know, we talked about the 6 games that are on Peacock. That has drawn some ire of certain fans inside the Big East, and I get their frustration. Part of the Peacock package is going to feature a game between St. John's and UConn. And it was interesting at first sight to see that game on the schedule as a Peacock game because, let's be honest, streaming games do not do nearly as well as over-the-air games. I understand that the way the world is moving is towards streaming, and that is the future. But it is not entirely the present right now. Cable, over-the-air broadcasts are still the movers and drivers of television numbers in sports. It's just a fact. It's an unavoidable fact at this point. And when you watch the way the football conversation has gone, so much of the money that has gone out in terms of TV contracts is dictated by your top tier games. Whoever can generate not just a consistent million eyeballs for college football games, but to get those games that can get over the 4 million threshold, that can sneak into the 7 to 10 million eyeball threshold. And then in the SEC's case, or Ohio State with the Big Ten, even sneak into 14, 15 million. That's where you get the big money on the back end. Basketball is a little bit different because it's more of a volume game. You're filling so much airspace on these networks. And while you may not draw huge numbers in any one spot, if you can consistently draw numbers, you keep those eyeballs in place and those viewing habits. And I think that's still how the business mostly works in terms of why college basketball is a draw. But make no mistake, if you can get 2-3 million viewers on a college basketball game, that's a monumental deal. You just don't see that. I mean, Duke, North Carolina is struggling to draw in those type of numbers at a UConn, St. John's game, at the Garden, or late season in Connecticut. If there's a potential Big East championship on the line or a number 1 seed, could draw in eyeballs in that vicinity. UConn's done it in the past. But, and this is important, this is the way college sports work now. Big East got to find revenue wherever they can, right, David? I mean, they aren't football. They don't have that money that's just going to pour in no matter what. They went out and procured themselves a deal with Peacock. Peacock gave them some money. NBC and Xfinity handed over significant television resources and dollars to the Big East for this package, you're not going to get them to pay that type of money by delivering them Xavier Providence on every other Tuesday. Like, that's just not the way this is going to work anymore. You have to give them some big games. Kevin Willard's first game back at Seton Hall is on Peacock. One of the UConn St. John's games is on Peacock. Does it stink? Yes, it does. Is it going to hurt your overall TV numbers? Yes, it will. Is it going to be maybe a thing that isn't ideal long term? It's not going to be great the next time the TV deal maybe comes up and you're looking to renew and you don't have that big number game that you can point to that you might have been able to get with St. John's UConn. But you're getting the money right now, and it just seems like you got to get whatever you can at the current moment.
Well, I mean, that's the long and short of it. NBC, Peacock put out a lot of money, and I'm sure they said, you have to give us at least one marquee matchup. The St. John's UConn is going into the season, at least on paper, those should be the two best teams in the Big East. That's a marquee matchup that I'm sure the execs at NBC said, we want that on Peacock because even if we can get people to do the week free trial, we think, okay, you stick around for that week, you start watching shows, and then you say, I'll buy Peacock. The NFL is going to have one game on here. There'll be some more Villanova games on here. There'll be some more St. John's, UConn games on here. Why not? I'll just buy it. And I think that's the ultimate goal because, I mean, that's really ad dollars are on traditional over-the-air cable services. The streaming services, you paying your monthly fee plus the ad dollars that they're also getting.
Isn't that funny how that ended up?
So, like, if they can get, I don't know, a few thousand people to sign up for a monthly Peacock subscription, they probably come out ahead. And that's all that NBC and Peacock care about.
Well, and remember, there is a natural kind of lineage there because you got a bunch of Catholic schools that don't have major college football, and you have that relationship with Notre Dame football that NBC has had since 1991, the thing that transformed all of this into the mess that it's become. You know, say what you will about Notre Dame, and there's a lot of great things that you can say about their tradition in football, but boy, did they cause some problems when they made that NBC deal. That has kind of been the trickle-down effect that's led to so much of this chasing the almighty dollar. Everybody was chasing Notre Dame in the 90s, and then it just snowballed out of control. But Peacock having those Big East schools, because as you said, when you're trying to make that decision, do I just stay aboard? A lot of these schools also will at least follow Notre Dame football. There's a Notre Dame football game on there. I can watch all the Notre Dame football games streaming. There's just a lot of reasons why this relationship would make sense, but Big East needed to maximize dollars. And so you give them a few carrots, and one of the carrots was St. John's UConn. I understand the fans' frustration. Get it. Kind of share it. Love watching games on DVR. Yeah. That is one of my, I might be one of the few people in the world that watch live sports on delay on DVR. I think a lot of people, though, our age who have kids, the ages our kids are, will kind of go through that from time to time. You can't just drop everything and watch every game starting at 7 o'clock on the dot. Sometimes you got to start it at 7:30 or 7:45 and skip some commercials to get caught up. And that might not be an option any longer. But
the other thing is you're bringing in that new generation that may not have traditional cable. On Peacock, you can still watch traditional NBC live. So you're trying to marry two groups of people. One who's traditionally, I'm going to have a cable package, I'm going to watch everything there. And one that says, no, I'm not going to pay for cable. Like we said, I'm going to buy all these streaming services. And now you're trying to get them to merge into one conglomerate of people. So
yeah, those young people that think they're so much smarter than us old folkies that still have cable, and then they look at their bill and you add it all up at the end of the day. Wait a minute, I'm spending more money than I did when I had the cable. What happened there? Again, I digress. All right, but the reason why all these dollars are so important, because of course the landscape that we have talked about many times, how it changed in so many ways in college athletics, and more news recently unfolding that is significant on the college sports scene, that it's just going to get more and more cutthroat in terms of dollars and cents being the only thing that matters. How about the Big Ten soft leaking it to ESPN last week that they are on the hunt for private capital deal that would infuse $2 billion into the league and its schools. It includes a 10-year extension to the grant of rights. A tiered revenue distribution is on the table, but $2 billion. Hey, what happened to that House settlement evening out the playing field and making sure that there was a limit on how much money everybody could spend? We were all told that this is the future. We're fine. We have this figured out. And then you turn around and suddenly 6 months later, the Big Ten's trying to get $2 billion infused into their coffers. These are not tax exempt institutions, by the way, but that's a different subject. How in the world is this going to work? And why, in your mind, will the Big Ten do it?
How is it going to work? I don't know. I mean, we're talking about building what Big Ten enterprises where all 18 schools have a share, the private capital group has a share, and the conference has a share. We don't know what those shares are going to look like. I mean, right now, what Washington and Oregon, is Oregon taking a partial share of the
Partial
Big Ten?
share, yep.
Yeah, they're taking partial. What's that?
Well, Washington and Oregon took partial shares. USC and UCLA got full shares, but remember that grandfather's out over the course of this TV contract, and that's what's so interesting about the grant of rights deal. There was some thought that maybe they would make Washington and Oregon whole because this allows them to further renegotiate those TV contracts and maybe extend them down the line, and that way you don't have that inequity. But then there was pushback from Ohio State and Michigan because, David, as you said, you got 20 entities here that would potentially have stakes. Each school would have one, and then it would be the league office would hold one, and then this private capital group that would infuse this $2 billion. This private capital group is going to demand a return on that money. They don't want $2 billion back. They want $3 and $4 billion back. So you get a bunch of cash up front. And obviously, as most people understand, the idea of private capital is you get $2 billion now, and you make your product so valuable that the return on investment, even though you have to pay out more than that down the line, you're just printing money, and it makes it all make sense. Unfortunately, so often it doesn't always work out that way. And for college athletics, there are just a huge set of questions that come about from this, starting with, if you're Ohio State and Michigan, why? If you're Ohio State and right now you are mad at Fox, right? You are very upset at Fox because they're putting every football game on at 12 noon. This week, perfect example. Fox has the Ohio State-Illinois game at 12 noon. Now, it is not at Ohio State, but it's not the best game in the Big Ten. The best game of the Big Ten is Oregon-Indiana, and yet somehow Ohio State still gets stuck with another 12 noon game, even though they're playing the second best game of the league because they deliver the eyeballs. So Ohio State's going to say, hold on a second. We get none of the benefits that we want in terms of flexibility of when we can play these games. Our fans have to wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning if they want to tailgate before the football games. Our basketball games are all over the place. They're on Peacock. They're on FS1. Like, we aren't getting consistent eyeballs on our products in terms of that regard. And now we're going to share our revenues out long-term with all of these other schools and a private capital group when we're generating most of the money. So the Big Ten is countered with opening up the discussions of tiering revenue distribution, which would mean Ohio State would get more, Michigan would get more. But then that opens up a can of worms.
That's the thing.
Weasel their way into that top. Is USC? Is Oregon? How is all of that going to end up playing out? It just seems like you're creating more problems than you are solutions.
You're definitely creating infighting. If you go to a tiered system, who's going to agree to take a lower tier? Is it going to be Rutgers? I mean, Rutgers they don't draw eyeballs. They're not successful.
Yes.
Oregon isn't going to say, we'll just take Oregon was in the college football playoff last year. They just beat Penn State at Penn State. It looks like they're on the way to the playoff again. They're going to say, wait a minute, guys. We're doing our part. We're getting to the playoff. We got Phil Knight in our back pocket, who's can give whatever money we need. So we're not going to take a smaller chunk. And I understand Ohio State and Michigan are traditionally the Big Ten powers. So, of course, they're going to say, no, we're not going to share everything that we bring in with Northwestern. Like, so
Well, it's
I
the
think
brand. It's the brand power, David. I mean, the perfect example is Oregon, Penn State played at the same time as Alabama, Georgia, a couple Saturdays ago in prime time. Georgia, Alabama smoked Penn State, Oregon. I mean, I think it was. I mean, Penn State, Oregon did really well, but it was like 5 million more viewers to Georgia, Alabama. If Ohio State's in that game, if it's Ohio State, Penn State, or if it's Ohio State, Oregon, Ohio State wins that eyeball contest. And that's the fundamental difference. And that's where if I'm Ohio State, I'm saying no chance here, no chance whatsoever unless you make me whole. You either got to start to build some big time flexibility into these TV deals for me, or you've got to give me more money. This is not a Big Ten show. This is not an Ohio State show, but we just bring up the point of that this causes a lot of problems. It causes huge problems, though, on the trickle-down effect towards college athletics. The Big Ten is trying to position this as an attempt to stave off the Super League, right? That's what Tony Petitti has leaked to the media as the official position of the Big Ten. But let's game this out. Common sense. Who's the biggest guy in college athletics that has spoken out against private equity and private capital investment? Greg Sankey, the commissioner of the SEC. He has been against it. He thinks it's a fool's errand. He thinks it's against the mission of college athletics. He doesn't necessarily know how it works out legally because, again, you're a lawyer. Maybe you can explain this.
This is going to be challenged. And we just got through the House settlement. Now you're going to bring in $2 billion and the athletes are going to say, okay, cool. We don't need any more. Of course it's going to.
Put a pin in that. We'll come back to the athlete portion of it. We're just talking about the infrastructure portion of it. That's the next part that's coming to it that will have a big impact on the Big East. But so the Greg Sankey position of no on private equity, I think, is one of the reasons why when Brett Yormark, the commissioner of the Big 12, tried to force it down his university president's throats at the beginning of the summer, he got a lot of pushback saying, no, this doesn't really make sense because Greg Sankey had been so adamant about how it wasn't a good idea and a good direction for college athletics to go. So he's kind of been the guy that has stood between us and what seems like an inevitable future because it's tons of money up front and there's no long-term vision in college athletics from seemingly anyone. If Big Ten takes this money, the SEC has to turn around and take this money. They can't be $2 billion behind the Big Ten. They have got to match them on the grand stage or they'll get left behind, especially in the wild, wild west era of college sports where there seems to be no rules whatsoever. So now you get the SEC to do it. Other conferences are going to try to follow, but no one's going to generate anywhere near that amount of money in terms of investment. And by the way, they're going to have a much harder time, all the other conferences, trying to get the ROI in terms of make the money for the investors and still be generating enough that you're bringing in the type of money that you need long-term to even stay in the same stratosphere. We're talking ACC, Big 12, football playing schools, let alone a conference like the Big East where it doesn't have football expenses, but it doesn't have football revenue either. I'm not sure what private capital investment would look like for the Big East. I know there are smart people inside that legal office that would be able to come up with something and find a way to generate some money coming in, and you don't have the same level of expenses that the football playing schools do, but it's just another wedge that puts them further ahead and further apart from where you are, and it just seems like imminent disaster gets closer and closer. What's that thing that's floating around outer space right now that we're not entirely sure what it is that they're arguing, whether it's an asteroid, whether it's just a floating interstellar piece of mass, or whether one guy said it was aliens that had found a way to get into our solar system. I think that it's that type of thing that is headed towards the college sports universe, and it doesn't feel like any type of good is headed our way.
No, I agree. And I mean, I think for the vast majority of conferences, private capital coming in is going to be a bad thing. not to fight against Greg Sankey and him being the protector of college sports, but I think he's got a dog in the fight, and he understands that while there is plenty of money in the SEC, the Big Ten might have a few more revenue streams to get money out in terms of the cities they're in, the universities that just produce really high earners. So I think Greg Sankey has a little bit of, I don't know if we can win that arms race against the Big Ten.
No, for sure. Look, Greg Sankey is not a pure individual. His hands are as dirty in the ruination of college sports as anyone, but he might be the only guy that looks at it in terms of the big picture. Pat Forty of Sports Illustrated, I thought, had a great line, whereas so many people for so long in college sports had been looking out for at least the collegial spirit of college athletics. I mean, Kevin Willard talked about it. And one of the things when he was on with Andy Katz, the reason he enjoys being a coach inside the Big East Conference is because there is a collegial feel. The conference is built of like-minded institutions, of people that maybe have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, and they're trying to go up against machines and that maybe are a little under-resourced, but pour so many of their resources into this thing that they truly care about, that is the most important thing to their athletic departments, that maybe sits second or third fiddle at other places. And that's great. And that is what makes the Big East special. And that is why we work for a place like Big East Energy Network, because I buy into that wholeheartedly. I do think that it is unique to college sports in this day and age. But there's only so much a collegial spirit can do and can get you. And as much as we try to hold on to that, you have guys like Tony Petitti, as Pat Forty wrote in Sports Illustrated, that seem to look at college athletics and in the ways that they aren't pro sports and view that as a problem. And we have to figure out a way to solve that and get them to be more like pro sports. Whereas for so long, maybe to a fault, by the way, in terms of limiting what players could make and creating ridiculous arcane rules, we tried to keep the uniqueness or the unique aspects of college athletics. And now if Petitti has his way, it's going to become, I mean, it already is basically minor league professional sports connected to colleges, but it's going to become truly to the next degree and kind of to the point where you aren't going to be able to recognize this at all anymore.
Yeah. And I mean, like I said, the NCAA kind of let this cat out of the bag. The NCAA fought so long for amateurism above everything. You can't have anything. You can't have anything. You can't have anything. To the point where it was taken out of their hands, unfortunately. And the court said, well, no, they can have stuff. We'll just let them have everything. And there were no guide rails in place. So we're in the collegial spirit. I love it. I wish we were still there. I wish that college football teams would all go independent and allow basketball conferences to be formed again. Form the College Football Super League. That's what you want to do. So just form it, have actual leagues that make sense in basketball, and go from there. But you can't fight if you're not playing on the same playing field. If some people are like, you know what, this is for the good of college sports, and others are saying, no, I just want money, you're going to lose to the people who just want money and go out and get money.
Well, okay, so then here comes the next part of the equation that doesn't make any sense. So right now, the only argument against making these athletes employees and collectively bargaining and trying to get some structure into this is actually an argument that makes sense and does open up a whole nother mess that they don't necessarily know how to wrap their arms around and get figured out. If you make them employees, it just upends the entire structure of how everything is put in place. And you're basically going to have to recreate this whole thing. And it's very complicated because, again, these are tax exempt entities that are these universities, and you can't just run everything like you're a traditional business, and you don't have the antitrust exemptions that other pro sports leagues have. So there are just so many complications that come with making the athletes employees. And by the way, it probably, at least the way the rules are set up right now, makes matters worse for the athletes if you make them employees. They're not going to be able to generate nearly as much in a collective bargaining setting that they probably are right now. You're going to have some compromises that will rein that in. But, and this is critical, David, if you put $2 billion of money into your coffers, all of those practical arguments that you're trying to make in terms of look at the problems this creates, you can't make any of those arguments anymore with a straight face. You just got handed $2 billion. Use some of that $2 billion to figure it the heck out, because you have very little sympathy for your arguments right now, but you have legal sympathy. People like you who are pretty wise on this do understand this is not nearly as simple as we'd like to pretend that it is. But when you get $2 billion, you're going to have, like, I don't care how complicated it is, and I don't care how painful it's going to be, how many problems it's going to cause. You can't then continue to say things like, we're going to cap the payment to these athletes at $20 million, and we're going to make sure that they can't get money from outside entities unless it's legitimate NIL. You're not only going to lose in court, you're not even going to get into courtrooms. You're just going to get amicus briefs that are going to rule against you. It's going to be that ugly for these colleges. There's just no way that they can think with a straight. It must mean they know this House settlement has no shot whatsoever of holding up, even in the short term, let alone the long term, if they're aggressively going after this type of infusement of funds. And to me, that also spells in imminent disaster for what we're looking at with college athletics, because their entire strategy was this House settlement. Like, that is what they have been building towards for years now.
But I mean, even the House settlement, you've removed the enforcement arm from the NCAA, who is really the only one able to enforce anything. And I mean, say what you will about the NCAA, they've had plenty of problems. I don't think they're the best organization. But now you've created a commission that was created by the universities to also police the universities. It doesn't work on a logical level that, hey, I'm creating you to tell me that I can't do something. No.
And not only that, you've partnered with Deloitte, which, I have plenty of friends that work for Deloitte. No disrespect towards Deloitte. We're Villanova show. I'm sure there's some people watching this show that work for Deloitte. But, they have not always executed things in the most flawless fashion imaginable. No. Look at the mess when they get involved in sports. Look at the mess that you have in the WNBA right now. The commissioner at war with her players, and a very public war, by the way, that is going back and forth. Where did the commissioner of the WNBA come from? Remind me again.
I can't remember.
It's a little company called Deloitte. Yeah, like, it's just unbelievable how you are now going back to big picture, where we're looking at these people that have made so many wrong decisions and so many forks in the road they've found, where you had a very direct path that made complete sense, and then you had a wandering, meandering, circular path that they said, oh yeah, we got to go down that one. That's the path we're taking. So those type of decision makers are going to go with private capital. And the only thing, I'm not a rich person in any way, shape, or form, but everything I've ever been told about these type of investments are, the only way it works is if you are incredibly smart business people.
Yeah.
Are these incredibly smart business people that are running these entities? Does it feel like, I mean, they're good at making money, there's no doubt about it, but it's because they run things that operate big football production. Exactly. It feels like anybody can make money if you run a popular football production.
Exactly. And I mean, to go back to your CBA stuff, the legal issues there are crazy. You're talking about college athletics is nowhere near pro sports, and just the sheer turnover. At 4 years after you've signed that CBA, 95% of the people that were under that CBA are gone, and you have an entire new class of athletes. Like, that's not how any sports league works, where your turnover is maybe 10% a season, and a lot of those are going to be people that aren't the stars that are driving the CBA. So, I mean, I don't know what the answer is. I don't think private capital is going to fix anything. I think it just exacerbates the problem and pours gasoline on it. And we say, we'll see. We'll see what happens. But it makes no sense to me. The house settlement never made sense with an entity.
We said that, didn't we?
Yeah.
We said that at many steps. And by the way, we're often wrong, but on this case, it feels like everything we said in June, we said in August, is coming to fruition. These schools know there's no way that they can dictate this, that will never, ever hold up. So was it a smokescreen? Did they think we were all stupid? And was this their plan all along, to end up distracting us with, hey, we have this figured out? Oh, the solution is we're going to infuse $2 billion of capital investment into it and further damage the competitive balance of college athletics and the haves and have-nots.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the only way, given where we are right now, to make it sustainable is to eventually make players employees, which comes with a whole host of problems. But having them sign contract, there's going to have to be some sort of contract wherein I bring you in, I offer you a $3 million NIL deal. Now, if you decide that you're going to transfer the next year, we got to have some compensation, because this isn't going to work. It's just, my head hurts thinking about it.
Yeah, well, at that point, NIL is going to be its own separate thing. You're going to have to sign contracts. It's going to be like the NFL, where you sign either 2-year or 3-year deals, whatever it is. We still have to get figured out eligibility. Those are still going through the courts. At some point, right now the colleges are winning, which thankfully, because I don't know what we would do if the day comes where a judge says, yeah, there's not a lot of industries where you can say you can work this job for 4 years and then you can't work this job anymore. That's another part of the problem that people have said. If you become employees, it's hard to say, yeah, you can only be an employee until you're 23 years old, or you can only be an employee for 4 years after high school. There's just not a lot of jobs out there that exist like that, where you can put those type of age parameters. There are pretty strict, I mean, you would know this a lot better than myself, but there are pretty strict age discrimination rules out there that all of a sudden start to come into play when you're talking about employment rather than a student activity that's associated with going to college at a university.
Yeah, there are. I mean, most of them are only for excluding people 65 and over, so there's not a lot of concern there. But I mean, just workplace requirements, it's going to be a headache for universities. I don't know how they turn the athletics program into a profit-gaining part of the university that is a tax-free entity, like you said, or tax-exempt entity. I don't know if you're going to have to split athletics from the university in a formal way if you ever go down that road of athletes being employees, which would, again, just add a whole host of other things that you have to think about. This is where the NCAA's leadership since probably the early 2000s, when it really started kicking up, that like, hey, before that, 90s, when you had the Fab Five at Michigan, and they were talking about they couldn't buy food, and how
it goes back way longer than that. Read the Dan Wetzel book about Jerry Tarkanian. They've been after him since the mid-'70s, and he was in the Big West, and he would be staring out there and looking at John Wooden's guy paying left and right to UCLA athletes, and then Jerry Tarkanian's getting grief for giving out lunch money on the side and got banned from being on TV, then got banned from the postseason, sued the NCAA, I think, 3 times? Jerry DeCarcanian, I think was the number. So, yeah, I totally agree. The NCAA spit the bit, no doubt about it.
But
Let's
I think it was the 90s when public opinion
Oh,
started to
in terms of
turn
public
against
opinion,
them.
yeah. I think, yeah, the argument started in the early 90s, and when Chris Webber was, I can't afford pizza, and despite all these T-shirts, yeah. Now, it turned out Chris Webber was making $100,000 on the side. And again,
He had a
everybody
very
lies
nice
in
car.
college athletics. Yes, everybody lies in college athletics. That is a fundamental truth. But let's spin this back to, again, what we talked about in terms of the implications on Villanova and the Big East. To me, the biggest thing that is the concern for Villanova and the Big East and all conferences that don't have major college football, and really at this point getting closer and closer to all conferences that aren't the Big Ten and the ACC, is, does a Super League occur, and does this bring us closer to the Super League? Because if a Super League occurs, you split off in football. The obvious answer would be to make football its own entity and do what you suggested, and then bring all your other sports under the fold. But then there would be a whole other set of legal issues that would come about because of that, because the smaller schools would say you can only spend so much money on all these other sports because we don't have the millions upon millions that are brought in from football. It would have a bad trickle-down effect. So I'm not sure realistically you can have a super conference of 40 football schools and then have them compete in all the other sports with the rest of college athletics. I think it's going to be a fission that it completely has to separate at that point. I don't think there's nothing that has happened that gives me any faith in their ability to make that work.
Yeah, I think we are a long way away from a Super League. I think what's most likely to happen if the Big Ten goes down this road, even if they don't, I think it's likely to happen. You're going to talk about the top teams in the Big 12 and the ACC trying to find homes in the SEC or the Big Ten, whether that involves only a partial share or what. They're going to be these two massive college football conferences with the other ones not being able to compete in any legitimate way. And then maybe one day those two conferences say, like, hey, why are we doing this? Maybe we should just combine forces and become one power conference. But I think that's a long way away. I mean, I don't know what the ACC's grant of rights runs out in 2036, but 2030 is when the buyout really drops. So it's a while, but
I got news for you. That's not that far away, man. Like I know that still sounds like a made up number. 2030 is 5 years away. That's the next pressure point. But here's the thing, David. You look at this. I don't know if it'll be a formal Super League at this point. I don't even know if they necessarily have to do that. But if you bring $2 billion into your fold in terms of this private capital infusion, and you force the SEC to do something similar, obviously the other leagues are going to have to follow suit. But they're going to bring in who knows if the ACC exists at that point. Big 12 will still exist. Big 12 brings in $500 million, $700 million. That's $1.3 billion difference that you're looking at on top of all the other differences that already exist. It's just, it starts to get to, right now, it feels unsustainable, but we all want it to work. So we're all kind of hugging tight and trying to find a way to make it work. There is a certain dollar difference that becomes a breaking point because remember, the reason this all exists is it's supposed to be the front porch of a university, right?
Yeah.
Pride in your school. You're out there on the national stage. You're a big deal. You are raising money off of this. People come back to the university, feel connected to the university because of this.
You're raising the stature of the university with students who apply, applications, acceptance rate, all of those things.
If you are so far behind those other schools, that starts to become less and less of a factor. And the less important all of those additional things become, and the more money you have to put out to try to stay in the stratosphere of these other schools, at what point does it become a white flag situation where you just, we can't. We're just, we've always been on different playing fields. Now we're in different solar systems.
Now, I actually feel like if this were to happen and the SEC and the Big Ten go chasing that capital, that the Big East is probably in a better position than the ACC or the Big 12. I mean, the Big 12 will have Texas money, but they're still trying to play football with a fraction of what the Big East and SEC bring in. Whereas the Big East being in the Northeast, where there is a lot of money floating around in the Northeast, if you can bring in a fraction of what the SEC and Big 12 or Big 10 are bringing in, all of that is essentially funneled to men's basketball. I think you might be in a better position. But that's what we said with the House settlement, and that blew up in about 10 minutes.
Yes. Yes, it did. I don't even know if it lasted 10 minutes, to be honest. Again, the most concerning part is it just feels like they knew it wasn't going to work. And it kind of feels like, what was that thing that we saw between the Big Ten, the ACC, and
the Pac-12, the agreement that, hey, we're not going to screw each other over until we do it.
Until Kevin Warren's out there recruiting the two big members of the Pac-12, and the conference doesn't exist anymore. That's the thing, though, that still remains scary. It's fun to make jokes. I agree that, because the Big East is so unique, there is a path, but no one thought that the Pac-12 would disappear. I know it's coming back in a completely inferior form, but we all thought that the Pac-12 would evolve. Eventually, there would be teams that would depart. It would look drastically different, but we didn't think it would have two members left from where it was. Like, this stuff happens fast, and you don't know what these guys actually are planning. And they don't know what they're planning is the scariest part to me. You're putting $2 billion into their coffers, and now they become, the other problem with it is they become even more desperate to make money. That's the next part of the equation. It's no longer, it's never been about just collegiality. It has been like that since the TV decision got changed, where you could be on TV more than one time per year. That kind of ended the court case in the 70s. But it was still, there were other things you were trying to accomplish. There's no longer any other things that it's kind of like what we just talked about with the TV conversation. Big East doesn't want to put UConn, St. John's on Peacock. Long term, it's not great for the conference, but you don't have any choice. You got to get Peacock to give you as much money as possible. The only way they're going to do that is you give them one of your two best pieces of inventory. I mean, that's essentially what's happened. They sacrificed probably 750,000 eyeballs on that game, right? I mean, it'll probably be viewed by 250, 300,000 people. Would have gotten, maybe more than that, maybe 450,000 people. It would have been viewed by 1.3, 1.4 million people if you put that on the right day.
Oh, for sure.
You have to do it, though, because you need the money. That's only going to get worse and worse if you're talking about your competitors bringing in $2 billion. And there's no catching up to that. There's no Peacock that gets you $2 billion.
And it's unfortunate because when the Big 12 or the Big 10 and the SEC seem to be in this arms race that doesn't end, there's no okay, we've reached a level where we're good. No, it's like, let's just keep going. So every other conference has to just try and replicate it as best they can. Like, no conference can just sit back on their laurels and say, oh, we'll just let them have their fun over there. So,
and that's the beauty of the Big East. They have done as good a job as they possibly can kind of doing that. We're different. We don't have football. We don't have to spend the money on football, so there's a workaround. But the workaround only lasts so long. Like that, Kevin Willard, so many people thought he comes to Villanova because now you don't have to compete with football for those dollars. But if it's $2 billion, it doesn't matter. Like, you could spend on both at that point. Like, there's just I don't care how much money you want to spend on football. You can't. There's only so much money you can spend on. It will go to everything. It's not good times. It's not hate to be doom and gloom. Still think that cooler heads will prevail to a degree, but it doesn't seem like we're headed in a good spot right now. Mid-major sports are in big trouble.
I mean, there's no, I don't see how they survive in this climate. I mean, especially not compete. Like they can compete within their conferences. I don't know how. I think we lose a lot of the magic of what the NCAA tournament is. Those first 2 days or the first weekend where you get the mid majors who upset Kentucky or whoever, and with that money floating around, it's going to just get harder and harder and harder. It's already hard enough for the mid-majors because they build up these guys and then they just leave to go to greener pastures. So it'll be.
It does. What it feels like what you're going to end up being is you're still going to be able to catch lightning in a jar. You're going to be able to get one game. The runs to the Sweet 16 or St. Peter's getting to the Elite Eight, which again I know was not always a part of basketball, but had become kind of the new age of March Madness. Is that that seems like
VCU
the thing in the past.
Final Four, Butler
George
back
Mason.
to back Final Four. Yeah, like that's gone. I think.
But the Big East in that middle ground where they are a power conference in basketball, but they aren't bringing in power conference revenue. That's where that's a hard needle that they have to figure out how to thread. And if I'm a Big East fan, we talked about it when the House settlement thing came. Root for this to work. I don't see how it does work, but boy, it's the best thing that could ever happen to the Big East. Doesn't look like it's working. And now this private capital thing, it's even worse. Root for the cooler heads to prevail. Root for the Ohio States and the Michigans of the world to say, no, we're not giving away all our control to some outside entity. We can make more money on our own. We'll see if that happens. David, good conversation. Maybe not the happiest of endings to the conversation, but you know what? It wasn't a happy kind of night for me. I was in a bad mood. The Phillies blew the game. Rob Thompson doesn't know how to manage his way out of a paper bag, so he had to come out here and yell at the moon a little bit, and I appreciate you letting me do that. And for everybody who watched, hopefully you enjoyed the byproduct of it.
Yep. I will always happily. I'm like Abe Simpson, just old man yells at clouds. I'm with you anytime you need it.
That is how our friendship was. All right, we'll be back, and we're going to look at some recruiting for Villanova. We're also going to take a look at some of the big guys for this Villanova team, what the front line might look like as we get closer and closer to the season. Also going to have another women's basketball show coming up. We're trying to set up another interview. Chuck Everson's going to come back on board to join us. We're trying to nail down an agreement with Chuck to perhaps be a regular contributor here on Holy Nova over the course of the season. So we got a lot of big things going. Again, hit the like button if you are an hour into this show. Come on, you owe us at this point. We may have bored you stiff, but you stuck around. We killed an hour of your day. Clearly, you didn't have much else going. Hit that like button for us. Help us get in front of more fans. And until next time, this has been Holy Nova. We are part of the Big East Energy Network.